What's up, guys? Can you guys hear me okay? Yeah? You guys can hear me okay? Okay, cool. I can't hear myself up here, so I'm just making sure. So, what's up, guys? My name is Maddie, just like Wyatt just said. I am 17 years old, actually a week and a half ago, turned 17, and I am a senior in high school, about to graduate in like 3 weeks, which is very crazy. So crazy. So, actually, this isn't in my notes, but I think I'm going to tell you guys a crazy camp story before we get started because, you know, some of you guys told them. So I'm going to tell you guys a story. So my first year at camp, I think it was three, something like that, maybe years ago. And I was doing the monkey in the tabernacle. You know, I had my phone in my little backpack, and I was going hard. I was going so hard doing the monkey that my phone, the little SOS feature on my phone, you know, where you like click the side button and then it like calls the police. So it did that. So so the police showed up to Lakeview and I was like, that's crazy. I accidentally did call you guys. They tried to like call me back, make sure I was okay. Service wasn't working apparently. So the police showed up my first ever, like the first night of my first year of camp. I knew basically nobody and I was so embarrassed. So that's my little camp story. It was Wyatt was there. It was a great experience. All right, so as Wyatt said, I'm here to talk to you guys about calling tonight, which is something that honestly I still myself haven't fully figured out. And yeah, so I get to talk to you guys tonight. So first we're going to go over what is calling. It's kind of this big, scary word, and I'm going to talk to you guys for a second about what calling is. Basically, calling is just the life that the Lord has assigned you to live. The life that the Lord calls you to have. In 1 Corinthians 7:17, it says, "Only let each person lead the life that the Lord has assigned to him and to which God has called him. This is my rule in all of the churches." So calling might sound huge and scary and big, but it's literally just the calling that he has assigned you to live. And it doesn't always mean what you're called to do, the job, the whatever you're called to do, but it's who you are called to be as a Christian person. In Ephesians 4:1-6, it says, "As a prisoner for the Lord, then I urge you to live a life worthy of the calling you have received. Be completely humble and gentle. Be patient, bearing with one another in love. Make every effort to keep the unity of the Spirit through the bond of peace." And nowhere in that verse does it say anything about working in a church. Nowhere in that verse does it say anything about a job. It simply just says the qualities as Christians that we are called to have. But we all also have a very specific calling as individuals and things that we are called to do specifically, whether it be like a job or whatever. So I'm going to tell you guys the story of how I realized my calling, if that's okay. Yeah? Awesome. So I went to a winter retreat 1 year, and the last night there was a message all about calling. This is actually the first time I ever met Morgan was at this winter retreat. So, you know, fun fact. So there was a message about calling the last night, and at the end, the person speaking had us spread all across the room and pray about what we were called to do. And instantly in that moment, God called me, and I knew that I was called to lead the next generation and bring them to Christ. And it became very evident to me that that's what my calling was. I knew it for a fact, but I did not tell a single soul. I was like, this is kind of crazy and honestly terrifying, so I'm not going to tell anybody. So this was in February, I think, of a few years ago. And then camp comes around, and I walked into camp super expectant. And if you guys are signed up for camp, if you're not signed up for camp, sign up literally right now because you got to go. It changes everything of your life, but also just your spiritual walk with Christ. But if you're signed up for camp, walk in expecting something out of God. Your expectation will fully affect your experience. So I walked in and I was praying and I was expecting him to move in a crazy way. And I really wanted him to give me clarity about what I was called to do. So I walked into camp super expectant, and I went to camp and I experienced so many different things that really gave me so much clarity about what I was called to do. And it was definitely the confirmation that I needed. And I actually remember going up to Wyatt when the buses were about to be loaded up. And I was like, "Wyatt, so I haven't been telling anybody, but this is what I'm called to." And yeah, and he was like, "Okay, yeah, cool, good for you." So I went to camp and I came out of camp and I was fully ready to walk in my calling and like go for it. I was like, this is my time to shine. So I signed up to be a leader at the kids camp for like the kids ministry of our church. So I signed up to go as a leader, and I was hype. I was so excited to go, like so excited. And all my bags were packed, and then the day before camp, I tested positive for COVID. So, it was so lame. I didn't get to go. And that was kind of a moment where I was like, if I'm called to this, like, why did God let this happen to me? Because if I was called to lead the next generation, this would be the perfect opportunity for me to do so. And he just let it slip out of my hands. And it was super discouraging. And I was brokenhearted for a few months, if I'm being honest. And then I got a super cool opportunity to lead entire rooms of volunteers and kids in our kids ministry a few months later. And that was another confirmation of, like, that's what I'm called to do. And I knew that God took away this opportunity for me to go to camp as a leader, but he gave me such a big one in a new way. And recently, in the past 5-6 months, just like Wyatt said, I have been realizing that I can take my calling outside of the walls of a church. So I planned this whole event called The Reach. It happened on Friday night, and it was crazy cool. I planned it all by myself and had to figure out everything by myself, and I got it somewhat pretty cool. So 70 people showed up, and we had 2 salvations, which is super cool. 2 people gave their life to Christ that night. And I know that I'm already hearing stories of people that are taking what they learned that night and spreading it out to the rest of the city, and even people who just had moments that night that are helping them further their walk with Christ, and it's super, super cool to see. So through all of this, I know that was kind of a long story. My story time's over now. Through all of this, I have learned a ton about calling, and it wasn't on my own. I had a lot of people help pour into me. Why I'm here right now is because so many different people poured into me, and I learned a ton about calling, and that's what I'm here to tell you guys tonight. So my first point for the night is calling is confusing, but it doesn't have to be. We do not serve a confusing God. It says in the Bible that we do not serve a confusing God, and the confusion I've found when I'm walking in my calling or trying to figure out new things about my calling is not from God, it's from the worldly pressure to have it all figured out. I have felt so much pressure in my life to have every single thing, the college I want to go to, the thing I want to do after college, and everything after figured out before I'm like 15 years old. And I'm like, what the heck? Like, that's crazy. I am a senior in high school, just decided like 2 months ago where I'm going to go to college, and it's crazy. And there's this huge worldly pressure to have all of it figured out. Your calling, what you're called to do, and where you're going to go with that. But we don't serve a confusing God. I'm still here figuring out what I'm going to do. I don't even know what I'm going to major in. Like, I don't know. I have no clue. But God has it all figured out. His plan is perfect. And as long as I trust him, and as long as you guys trust him, it's going to go perfectly because his plan is so, so perfect. My next point is your calling counts. I feel like a lot of times I have been feeling like my calling doesn't matter because I'm still in high school. Or my calling doesn't matter because I'm not like a lead pastor of a church, so it doesn't even matter. My favorite verse in the Bible is Timothy 4:12, and it says, do not let people, just a second, I'm so sorry. Timothy 4:12 says, don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, but set an example for the believers in speech, in conduct, in love, in faith, and in purity. I have found that I'm using my age as an excuse a ton. And that verse is not saying that we can't step into our calling at a young age. We need to learn that no matter how old we are, Timothy 4:12 says, don't let anyone look down on you because you are young, and that includes yourself. So we need to learn that there's so much power in walking in your calling at a young age. There's so much life ahead of us. All of us in this room have so much life ahead of us, and if we learn to step into our calling at a young age, even in small ways, in your schools, in your families, in this community, there's so much life ahead of you that God's going to use in crazy ways. Find people that will pour into your life. I would not be standing here without Morgan and Wyatt. I can tell you that. I would not be standing on this stage if they wouldn't have chosen to believe in me, even as young as I was. And so find people. You guys are in really good hands. and find people that will pour into your life at a young age, no matter who that is, and use biblical knowledge, because there's a lot of people that will pour into your life with worldly things. Find people that will pour into your life and tell you who God calls you and tell you what you are called to do through God's eyes, not through the world's eyes. Another thing with your calling counts is a lot of people think that only means if you are called to work in a church, and that is not true. I went to the call rally last year, and there was a huge thing talking about called to things outside of marketplace ministry, things outside of the four walls of the church. We are all, as Christians, called to make disciples and called to grow the kingdom of God outside of the four walls. And if we stick in these four walls, we're not going to grow at all. So your calling counts, even if you don't think you're called to be a pastor. If you think you're called to be a hairdresser, go for it and tell people about the love of Jesus while you're doing it. Like, if you think you're called to be a flight attendant, that gets you all around the world, and do it and tell people about Jesus there. We need people to be the light in places outside of these walls. Something that I've been realizing a lot lately is he doesn't love you any more on the stage than he does in the streets. He doesn't love me anymore standing on the stage with this microphone than he loves you guys in your schools and in your streets and in your communities and in your families. He doesn't love me anymore. So you are so equally called to do whatever you feel called to do outside of the four walls of this church. And let me tell you, you do not need a microphone to walk in your calling. You don't need a microphone. I was sitting there waiting for somebody to hand me a microphone and give me permission to step into my calling. But the permission is it's yours to give yourself. You have to take charge and do it yourself even before people give you a microphone. And then people will hand you microphones in any room that you walk into, and you'll have this crazy power to tell people about Jesus if you start before you're handed a microphone. My third point tonight is calling changes. John 6:16-12 is one of my favorite verses right now, just because I feel like it's speaking into my life lately, so maybe it'll speak into y'all's. It says, "I still have so many things to tell you, but you can't bear them now." We serve a very gracious God. He's so gracious that he doesn't tell us all of the things at once. I know that if I was told every single thing in the entire world and all about my calling and all about my future life, I would probably freak out. I would be so overwhelmed and probably go crazy because I knew all of these things. And he tells us things based on what we can handle in that moment. We are not called to know all about our calling right now. Your knowledge of your calling will change with time. So what I feel like I'm called to do right now is going to change by the time I'm 45, just because the people I can reach right now are so different, and the ways that I can just be in my community are so different than they're going to be in 30 years. It's going to change, and it's okay if it changes. But no matter what, it's going to change, but we have to remember our general calling to be humble, gentle, loving, patient, and peaceful. That's what that verse at the beginning says. So we need to know that no matter what, our calling changes to a billion times, or our knowledge of our calling. We need to know that we are called to be those things to everybody that we meet. God doesn't just love the finished version of you. He doesn't just love the person who knows everything that they're going to do and the college that they're going to go to and the major and all of the things. He loves the you right now, sitting in this chair, probably listening to me, being like, what are you even talking about? Like, he loves you the same exact way. So don't get discouraged if you don't know what your calling is, or if you think that it's changing. Don't get discouraged. We are not supposed to know everything about it. My last point for the night is calling requires commitment. Your walking in your calling requires your yes. I know that I was sitting on that plane in December, and I heard God say this crazy thing to me about this worship night and all the things. And my first thought was, what the heck? I can't do that. Like, I'm not going to be able to do that. I'm, first of all, only 16. But second of all, I can't handle all of that pressure. I can't handle putting that together. But ultimately, I got home and I was like, okay, like, this is what I'm called to do. I have to go for it. So it required me saying yes. It is necessary to listen to him. It's necessary to sit and have quiet time. We have direct access direct access through prayer to the creator of the entire universe, like the entire everything that you see. We have direct access to him. We need to take advantage of it. It's confusing and it changes and all the things, but he is our ultimate guider and we have direct access to him and we need to listen to him. That is necessary to walk into your calling. My favorite word is obedience. My favorite word of all time is obedience. And I've learned, just like I'm using the reach as an example a ton because that's something super prominent in my life right now, and something that just happened. So I've learned that through that entire process, it probably wouldn't have gone the way it went if I wouldn't have just sat and listened and been obedient to what he was saying. I did plan so many things, and then when God said, drop it, I was like, okay, like that's not meant to be. I had lined up 10 speakers, 10 to speak, and on that night, there were 3, because God kept showing me signs of like, that's not the person that's meant to speak there that night. And it would have been amazing if I had this entire worship set and all the things with 10 speakers. That would have been so cool. But that's not what it was meant to be. It was meant to be a private, like intimate moment for all of us to be able to worship, not some huge flashy thing. And so if I wouldn't have been obedient in that, it would not have turned out the way it should have. And this is not me standing on the stage being like, I figured it all out and I was obedient and you guys aren't, so I did it right. Like, no, because it takes me so much time and so much energy, and it's hard to be obedient to what God's saying. It's not going to be popular. Your people in your schools aren't going to be like, oh, she was obedient to God. She's so cool. Like, they're probably going to look at you like you're crazy. And it takes that sacrifice, because that sacrifice is going to change everything, not just for you, but for so many people, and change their entire eternities if you're willing to be obedient to him. Obedience leads to overflow. An overflow of opportunities, goodness, grace, and love. And if you listen to him and are obedient, you're going to have so much overflow in your life, and he's going to repay that so much. That change that you want to see in the world starts with you guys in this room. We have such a huge responsibility as Christians to tell people about the love that we've experienced. I feel like a lot of us in this room have experienced the greatest love that you could ever experience in your life, the greatest love and grace and peace that you could ever experience. And I don't know about you guys, but I want to tell everybody about it. I want every single person to know the love and grace and peace and all the things that I've experienced through Jesus. And we have a huge responsibility to tell people about that. It changes their entire eternity, but it will require your sacrifice to change that. Like, it requires you, and it starts with you, and we can't just wait around and wait for it to happen. So tonight, you guys are going to have an opportunity to step into your callings in a huge way, just like I did at Winter Retreat 2 years ago. So I want everybody to stand up and spread across the room. And just like I received my calling, I want you guys to just sit there and have quiet time with God and really just ask God what you think you're called to. Maybe you're walking in your calling right now and you know exactly what you're called to do. Ask him what the next bold step that you can take toward your calling is. I don't want this to be a time where you like sit around and chit chat with your friends, because they don't know your calling. God does. They don't know what you're called to do. God does. So take intentional time to talk to God tonight. Ask him what your calling is or the next steps. It doesn't have to be confusing. It doesn't have to be this perfect thought out prayer. Talk to him like your best friend. Talk to him like somebody that you know so well and somebody that you love, because it doesn't have to be that hard. So let's pray for a few minutes.